Now as we turn over from chapter 36 into the second half of Alma's teaching to his son Helaman, there are some really profound truths that come out of this chapter. This is where Helaman is going to be the next prophet, the next high priest, and there are a whole bunch of things that go with that office. And so Alma, the younger, is going to take significant time here to introduce his son to each of these elements that he is now going to be in charge of taking care of and passing down through the generations. If you look at chapter 37, verse 6, to me, and this is just my personal opinion here, that verse 6 is the thesis statement for the entirety of what is going on in the rest of chapter 37. You'll notice he says, "Now you may suppose that this is foolishness in me, but behold, I say unto you that by small and simple things are great things brought to pass. And small means in many instances doth confound the wise." So if you look carefully at chapter 37, you're going to see a whole list of things that could be considered, especially by the world, as small and simple and not very important. Take a moment of reflection and think back on your life to some of the turning points in your life where you made some decisions or you turned and went a different direction with your life. What was it that caused that turn? Now, this may not be the case for all of you, but often it's small and simple things that come along. Somebody will say something or do something, or a door will open up and it seems small and insignificant. You walk through that door and next thing you know, your whole future has been changed. And it's pretty profound. Years ago, just as a little illustration of this, when I was teaching Institute up in Logan, at the Institute next to Utah State University, I had 100% job satisfaction. I loved teaching at the Institute. I loved my colleagues. I loved the students. I loved what I was doing, working with developing an online seminary program and working with some pre-service students, preparing them to be seminary teachers. I loved everything about my job, and I had zero intention of ever leaving the Seminary and Institute program. One day, two teachers from Brigham Young University, Frank Judd and David Whitchurch, were in the building observing some teachers, and Wayne Dimmock, the Institute director, came and told me that they were going to be in my class, and I said, "Wayne, I have zero interest in teaching at BYU. I am not leaving SNI." And he said, "Well, just be kind to them." I said, "Well, I can do that." After the lesson, I'll never forget this moment. I can still see in my mind's eye, in my office there in the Institute in Logan, David Whitchurch and Frank Judd sitting across from me, and I was being very kind and very friendly with zero interest in leaving the Institute. And David asked, "So Tyler, would you ever have any interest in teaching at BYU, potentially?" They weren't offering a job. They couldn't do that. They were just out searching for potential candidates. And I smiled and I opened my mouth to say very kindly, "Thank you, but I really have no interest, I mean zero interest, in teaching at BYU," which would mean I would have to leave the Institute program. And it was in that moment, my mouth was open, I was ready to say, "I have no interest," when four words came very forcefully into my mind with an exclamation mark attached. And the four words were, "Don't close any doors." And it came in command form in an instant. And remember, my mouth was open. I paused and said, "I've never really seriously considered it before." At which point I'm thinking, "What are you doing to me?" I couldn't figure out what was happening. Brothers and sisters, it was a very small, very simple thing that occurred in that instant, that I didn't close the door. And one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and next thing you know, we're teaching at BYU, and other opportunities for me to learn and grow and develop and do things had now opened up. But I didn't even know what to ask for before that point. Small and simple means is many times how God carries forth his work. Now watch as we go through chapter 37. Just look at this list for a minute. You get in verse 2. He describes the plates of Nephi that you're now going to be in charge of, Helaman. Small and simple to the world. Wow. Great things brought to pass. He then goes to verse 3. The plates of brass. You're going to be in charge of taking care of those. Small and simple, great things brought to pass. You'll notice then in verse 8, he says, now it has hitherto been wisdom in God that these things should be preserved, for behold, they have enlarged the memory of this people. These plates, these scriptures have been preserved because they enlarge the memory of this people. Small things, great things brought to pass. Because if you enlarge the memory of the people, you're going to increase their ability to have these moments where they repent, where they turn away from sin, away from the flesh and the natural man, and turn towards God and the things of the covenant path. Look at verse 11. This is a small and simple way to handle really big doctrinal questions that we don't yet have revealed. Notice he says, now these mysteries are not yet fully made known unto me, therefore I shall forbear. Kind of a fun approach to say, it's not been revealed, so I'm going to forbear. Because sometimes, brothers and sisters, we get so caught up in the deep and eternal mysteries when we really don't know. It's kind of like kindergartners sitting on the playground talking about principles of quantum physics just because we learned how to count to 10. There are some things that are revealed and there are others that aren't. And quite frankly, it doesn't do us much good to spend a ton of time in our classes hypothesizing or guessing about things that we really don't know. So Alma shows us a beautiful pattern here. I'm going to forbear. I don't know. And it's okay to not know. In fact, sometimes it's more dangerous to act like we do know. When we don't know, we can actually do more damage that way. Look at verse 13. Oh, remember, my son, Helaman, how strict are the commandments of God. If you circle commandments, that is a small and simple thing whereby great things are brought to pass. Look at verse 16. If ye keep the commandments of God and do with these things which are sacred according to that which the Lord doth command you, for you must appeal unto the Lord for all things whatsoever you must do with them. Now check this out. Behold, no power on earth or hell can take them from you, for God is powerful to the fulfilling of all his words. Small and simple diligence and obedience will bring about the great power of God to help us fulfill things. Now in Helaman's realm, that was, you do your best to take care of these plates and no power of earth or hell can take them away from you. But for us, it's we do the things that we're asked to do on the covenant path, and no power of earth and hell can remove that faith, that testimony from us, that conversion process from us. It's pretty profound. Now go to verse 21. Now I will speak unto you concerning these 24 plates. So we get the plates, the record of the Jaredites. Small and simple things, take care of them. The very ending of verse 21, preserve these interpreters. The interpreters that God gave, small and simple things that bring great things to light. Look at verse 32 through 35, 36, 37. He's talking about these small and simple elements of the gospel. Repentance, being humble, meek, lowly of heart, remembering to gain wisdom, to cry unto the Lord. Prayer is a small and simple thing which brings to pass great blessings from heaven. Then in 38, he talks about the ball or director, or our fathers called it liahona, which is being interpreted a compass. By the way, little trivia here, that's the only place in the entire Book of Mormon, 531 pages in English, where you get the name liahona. Everywhere else it's just referred to as the ball or the director or the compass. Here is where Alma the Younger actually gives it its name, the Liahona. Small, simple, intricate, it can't be replicated by man. And yet, because of that little small gift from God, it led them through the wilderness. Now look at verse 41. As you analyze as an individual, as a couple, as a family, whatever setting you're in, as you analyze the small and simple things in your life that are like a Liahona, that give incredible direction to guide you in the more fertile parts of the wilderness. Look at verse 41. Nevertheless, because those miracles were worked by small means, it did show unto them marvelous works. They were slothful and forgot to exercise their faith and diligence, and then those marvelous works ceased, and they did not progress in their journey. Sometimes we look for the big, the fantastic, the miraculous in order to then follow and be diligent and obedient. It's the idea of, if God commanded you and your family to build a boat or an ark, most of us would probably say, wonderful, let's go do it. And we would work at it. But if he says, love your family, love your neighbor, minister to the needs of those around you, sometimes it's so small and it seems so insignificant that maybe we don't give as much diligent heed to those commands as we do to the big, huge commands or the big callings in the church versus the little callings that seem so small and simple. And yet it's often in those callings where lives are totally changed because of a moment here, an experience here, or a pattern throughout that process of working with people and ministering with people. And I know of nothing more applicable to this principle than what happens in the home, what happens with families. It's not big, huge family vacations that create that covenant culture, as much as it is daily discipleship, daily striving to be good and to teach the correct principles, not just with our words, but with our actions. And when we see each other struggling and then repenting and granting forgiveness to each other and moving forward collectively as a group, great things are brought to pass. That, in my mind, is where lives are really changed in the most deeply profound ways. Let's finish this concept in chapter 37 with verse 44. For behold, it is as easy to give heed to the word of Christ, which will point to you a straight course to eternal bliss, as it was for our fathers to give heed to this compass, which would point unto them a straight course to the promised land. You'll notice if you look back a few verses that there were many times when they didn't give diligent heed to that compass, and so they wandered. And Alma tells Helaman here that they spent 8 years wandering because they didn't take a direct course, because they didn't give heed to the words and to the direction given on the Liahona. Now, when Alma finished with his son Helaman, he then turns his attention to Shiblon. Shiblon is a remarkable son, but we only get one chapter for him. As Jack pointed out earlier, the first part of chapter 38, from verse 1 down through 8, is kind of Alma summing up his story, the full chiastic version of his story that he gave to Helaman. He's giving kind of the highlights to Shiblon. He's not given him the full story in its entire detail. And then once he gets to verse 9, notice he shifts and he says, "Now, my son, I have told you this that you may learn wisdom